So, my question to kind of get things started is, what messages have you received about fear in your life?
Fear is implemented every day.
Every day?
Yeah. Like social media, news implements fear into all of us every day. But then there's also like what you are fearful of personally. So I feel like we all can go through that on a daily.
Yeah, right? We are inundated with information to be afraid of on a regular basis. And I love what you're saying about that, because it is a function of, it's a sales technique that has been used really since the advent of mass media. You need to be afraid, and I've got information for you, so tune into my channel to tell you what you should be afraid of, right? So yeah, I love what you're saying about that. Rich?
Yeah, Tim, conquer your fear. That's the message that I grew up with. Is conquer it, and if you don't, you're weak.
Yeah. Anybody else resonate with that fear is somehow equal to weakness?
Yeah, that's what I was yeah, that's like, same thing, you shouldn't be afraid you're weak.
Yeah, so I was, a few years ago, I was on a ropes course, one of those where you sort of hook up to the things overhead so you can't really fall off of it. And this one was about 3 stories tall, and this is my daughter Rosie. She and I were working across it, and there was a boy on the course with us, and there was one particular point where all of the things that you hold yourself up with were not there. You had to walk across this rope, and of course you couldn't really fall, but it was a pretty harrowing thing from 3 stories up. And this little guy started to cry, and his mother just started barking at him. She's like, "Stop it! No crying! We have no fear in this family." Like, well, see, here's the thing, right? This is such a pervasive message. Don't be afraid. Oh, conquer your fear. You have to beat it down. You have to beat it back. But the problem with that is that we have, especially in Western culture, we have made this such an idea that large numbers of people, so I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist by trade, and I would say the vast majority of the clients that I work with have a very difficult time identifying their fear and then being able to take action appropriately, because their critic inside of them, their mental idea about what fear is saying, don't be afraid, you should never be afraid, stop being afraid, what's the matter with you, right? Constant. The thing is that fear is your friend. Fear is here for a reason. And when we don't allow ourselves to be present to fear, we miss out on the messages that fear is giving us. So every single person here exists today because of fear. All of us have ancestors who listened to messages of fear and took appropriate action. And the ancestors who didn't, their lines died off, right? Warring tribes, or plagues, or natural disasters, eventually, wild animals, eventually got to those. And, and there were also those that listened to fear and just were unfortunate. But the idea being that the people who actually allowed themselves to hear the messages of fear took the appropriate action to survive and thrive in those circumstances. And that's how we end up here today, because of that lineage of fear. I keep notes because along with the hair on top of my head, my memory seems to be going places. We need to learn how to listen to fear without becoming overwhelmed by it. And we first start to listen to what fear is in our bodies, because that's how we know fear, by the way. The thought of fear comes second. The first thing we get is the physical reaction. So I want you to imagine that my fist here is a rudimentary model of the human brain. And because this is my brain, so it's smaller than the average brain, as you can tell. So right here on my knuckles, this would be the prefrontal cortex, which is right behind your forehead. This is the youngest part of our brain. Evolution, from an evolutionary perspective, this is the executive center of your brain that does all the good thinking and deciding what you're going to have for dinner. But if we peel that back up and look deep inside where my thumb is folded over, this would be a approximate location of something called the limbic system in your brain. The limbic system is your emotional center of your brain. Its primary job is the production and processing of your emotions, using your emotions as messages that you really need to be listening to. Now, curiously enough, the limbic system comes online, like it really gets efficient, during your teenage years. I'm looking at you. Right? So this is why, if you wondered why you were so emotional as a teenager, or perhaps you're a parent of teenagers and your teenagers are pretty emotional, it's because this is the part of the brain that's the loudest right now, okay? But right here, at the top of the limbic system is a little almond-shaped area called the amygdala. And amygdala is Latin for the word almond, because they looked at it and said, oh, it looks like an almond, and there you go, right? And the amygdala's primary job is to deal with fear. It's the part of your body that produces the fight or flight effect, or the freeze effect in some cases, right? So what the amygdala does is it produces a cascade of adrenaline and other hormones throughout the body. And this leads to the feelings we get, the accelerated heart rate. Quick breathing or shortness of breath is often how it's described. Butterflies in the stomach. Sweating, or you might have heard it referred to as flop sweat, like I'm sweating for no reason now, right? Or tense and even trembling muscles. These are cues. It's a rush of energy, right? And it's uncomfortable. And that's the problem with it. We don't like how it feels. I don't know about you, but when my heart starts to pound, the very first thing I wanted to do is stop right now. Except that I need to listen to that. See, what if instead of trying to get rid of it, we turn towards it with curiosity? Hey, what is this? What's wrong right now? What do I need to do about it right now? See, this is a clue that something important to you is being threatened. Now, not all fears are the same, right? So some fears, sometimes what's being threatened is your ego. And you probably don't need to start learning how to do, crotch strikes and palm strikes when your ego's being threatened, right? But sometimes what's being threatened, you're beginning to get the idea that something could potentially go wrong. It may be a clue to leave a situation. It may be a clue to start de-escalating the situation, bring everybody down. All right, let's just calm ourselves. And it might get to a point where it's a clue where it's time to take physical action to protect yourself. It's rare, but it can happen. Okay, so being here today, that brings us to why you're here today, this morning. And I want to go back to this rudimentary model of the human brain. I want to look inside again at the amygdala and something attached to it called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the part of your brain that's responsible for coding new memories. It's the part that says, oh, we want to hold on to this and be able to use it later on. This morning, you're working on your hippocampus. And we just learned over the last 20 years, this concept of neuroplasticity is the idea that you are constantly recreating your brain. You're constantly working on it. We used to think that your brain developed into your 30s and then it stopped and it was all downhill from there. No, seriously, this was the prevailing scientific wisdom for decades. Now we know that that's not actually true as long as you keep working on your brain. You come into a class like this and you begin to prepare yourself for something that could happen, and now your hippocampus has something to grab onto just in case you're put into a position where you need to use it. However, don't let this be the only class that you ever take in self-defense, because it takes regular practice. The more you do something, the stronger that neural connection becomes, and the more likely that your hippocampus is going to pull the appropriate information when you need it, once the amygdala starts doing its job to tell you that there's something to be afraid of. And notice that these two are connected to each other in your brain. Fear is one of the primary feelings that produces strong memories in us. How many of you have a really strong memory of something that terrified you? Yeah, right? That's because of this connection. So what I invite you to do this morning is let yourself be in the experience of something that scares you. And I don't mean that you need to like get all worked up and have a panic attack, but like right now, just thinking about it, what actually scares you? As connected to something like a self-defense class.